Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Baked Cowboy Dip. That's right, the original name for this delicious dip has an extra word after cowboy that rhymes with whack, which we won't be using, but it really did make sense since this stuff is so incredibly addictive. But the part of the name that doesn't make sense is, what does this have to do with cowboys? That is the real mystery here, and nobody seems to know, but I think I solved it, and I'll give you my theory at the end of the video. But in the meantime, let's get cracking by cooking up some sausage. And before we do that, as usual, we'll have to remove the casing, which we do by slicing the sausage lengthwise like this, at which point we'll simply peel that casing right off. And that's it. We'll do that to both those, and then we'll head to the stove, where we will place these in a dry pan set over medium-high heat. And as soon as those start to sizzle, and some of that fat starts rendering out, we'll go ahead and perform the old cook and crumble. And all that means is we'll brown this up while breaking it up with a spatula. And a flat wooden spatula, as you see me using here, is my favorite tool. Or some people like to use a potato masher, but since I'm using a nonstick pan, that's probably not a good idea. And in case you're keeping score at home, I'm using 2 hot Italian sausage. And how small you crumble this and how much it browns is going to be up to you. And you can see here how far I went. And then once we're happy with how that looks and feels, we'll simply turn off the heat and reserve it until needed. Oh, and if there's a ton of grease in the pan, you can go ahead and drain some of that out if you want. All right, mine was fine, so I didn't. But just something to keep in mind. And that's it. Once that's set, we can move on to the actual dip, which will start with 1 pound of room temperature cream cheese, to which we will add some sour cream, followed by a whole bunch of grated extra sharp cheddar. And yes, technically any kind of melty cheese will work for this, but I really think that extra sharp cheddar works the best with the next ingredient, which would be 1 package of premium frozen corn, which we thawed and drained. And yes, I did say premium. All right, don't be buying any cheap off-brand frozen corn for this. All right, spend the extra $1 and get the good sweet stuff. And then at this point, we can go ahead and dump in our cooked crumbled sausage, followed by a can of diced fire-roasted tomatoes. And the brand I'm using happen to have some green chilies in it, which is fine, but yours doesn't have to, because we're also going to add in a can of diced green chilies. And not to brag, but these were hatch chilies. I also like to add in some freshly diced jalapenos for a little extra kick, plus some freshly and thinly sliced green onions. And then we'll finish up by seasoning with some kosher salt, some freshly ground black pepper, and of course a few shakes of cayenne. And believe it or not, that's it. We'll go ahead and take a spatula and mix this until everything's thoroughly combined, which is going to take a few minutes, especially if you forget to take your cream cheese out of the fridge and let it soften, which I always, every time, forget to do. But anyway, we'll go ahead and mix that up, and then we have a major decision to make. And that is, how exactly do we want to enjoy our cowboy dip? Okay, do we want to serve it in its raw, uncooked form? Or do we want to bake it and enjoy it as a hot dip like we're doing here? And the only way to know for sure would be to do some taste tests. So once this is thoroughly mixed, we'll go ahead and grab a few chips, and we will sample this in its cold, uncooked form, which I think is extremely delicious, and I'd have no problem with you serving it just like this. But having said that, I do think this is a little better once it's baked, which is why after a few test tastes, I'm going to go ahead and transfer this into a baking dish. And once that's been placed in, we'll go ahead and smooth out the top, at which point, if we want, and I do, we can go ahead and sprinkle on a little more grated cheddar, plus maybe a few more shakes of cayenne for good luck. And yes, in case you're wondering, you can definitely make this ahead, even the day before, and then just bake it when you're ready. And that's it. Once our dip has been cheesed and peppered, we'll go ahead and place that on a sheet pan so it's easier to handle, at which point it's ready to transfer into the center of a 425-degree oven for about 30 minutes or so, or until our cheese is melted and our dip is bubbling around the outside, around the outside, around the outside, and hopefully looks like this. Now that looks like something you want to dip a chip into. And then for a final touch, I'm going to go ahead and garnish the top with a few more sliced green onions. And that's it, our baked cowboy dip is ready to enjoy, which I'm going to go ahead and do piping hot, next to some extra thick corn chips. And that, my friends, is just an absolutely delicious, wonderfully textured, highly addictive dip. In fact, once I was done filming, I just stood in front of this dish, eating chip after chip, until eventually I whispered to it, "I wish I knew how to quit you." So like I said, the old inappropriate name for this really did make sense. But what about the cowboy part? Right, there's no beef in this. And when's the last time you saw a cowboy pick an ear of corn or milk a cow? But I think I solved the mystery, since there is an old diced vegetable salad called Cowboy Caviar, which involves corn and beans and diced peppers and onions and a bunch of other vegetables. So what I believe happened is somebody took some leftover Cowboy Caviar and they stirred in some cheese and baked it. And this new creation was so delicious and so addictive, they ended up calling it Cowboy. So until I hear a better theory, that is the origin story I'm going with. And while I do enjoy this better baked than in its raw, cold, uncooked form, I do not think this stuff is actually at its best and most addictive if it's really hot. Okay, by far my favorite way to eat this is after it's baked, but once it's cooled down. Right, for me, both texturally and flavor-wise, that's when it's really at its best. So if it's my party, I would actually bake this ahead of time so that it's had a chance to cool down before people start sticking chips in it. But anyway, as usual, those kind of decisions will be up to you. I mean, you are, after all, the buckaroo of what to do. But whether you enjoy your baked cowboy dip hot, warm, or cold, or you don't even cook it at all, regardless, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.